This is Andrew Phipps, and I want to invite you to be with us for today's program. I think this is going to be a program that you will appreciate, one that you can think about for a good bit, perhaps one that you will want to share with others. You know, we put our materials also up on YouTube, and we're glad that we can do that, and we're trying to do as much as we can to get on whatever stations, television stations that the Lord would permit and us to do. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about Marxism, or the Marxian economy, or the revolution that we see in the country today. Just lately, Mark Levin wrote a book, and I want to read to you what he said in the dialogue. He said, "The counter-revolution to the American Revolution is in full force, and it can no longer be dismissed or ignored, for it is devouring our society and culture, swirling around our everyday lives and ubiquitous in our politics, schools, media, and entertainment. Once a mostly unrelatable fringe and subterranean movement, it is here. It is everywhere. You, your children, and your grandchildren are now immersed in it, and it threatens to destroy the greatest nation ever established, along with your freedom, family, and security." Of course, the primary difference between the counter-revolution and the American Revolution is that the former seeks to destroy American society and impose autocratic rule, and the latter sought to protect American society and institute representative government. The counter-revolution, or movement of which I speak, is Marxism. And I'd like to share with you today just a few things about what I believe, along with what Mark Levin, who is a noted author, television host, and great contributor. Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, I believe, in 1848. He, of course, embraced the idea that, according to his assertion, that from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. In other words, you take from the individual as they can do, and then you distribute it as the need exists. Obviously, this would pretty well obliterate economic classes. Later in 1918, when the Bolsheviks under Joseph Stalin came to power in Russia, we had the proletariat, who were the workers, and this was a movement against the bourgeoisie, or the capitalists, the owners. And in this revolution, power was seized by these Bolsheviks. They wanted a new kind of government. They wanted a new kind of economy. But unfortunately, in the overall period that Joseph Stalin was in, some have calculated that maybe many millions were killed, destroyed, or whatever under his reign. It is a controlled movement that began way back there with those people asserting, and of course Stalin came along much later, but even when you had Lenin and the progenitors of that line of thought, obviously equity was never achieved by the Russians. The nomenclature, those who had positions, those who were in positions of power and authority, always had vacations on the Crimea or on the sea. They had the luxury places. The people that lived in poverty were even reduced to further poverty. And we'll be back in just a moment. And friends, I do want to thank Clemens Home Solutions in Muncie for being regular contributors and making this program possible in our areas. We appreciate those folks, and we appreciate you taking time to be with us today. Our program today is focusing upon Marxism and the revolution that we have experienced over the years, and now seemingly it has come to our shores. A good friend by the name of Ken Wycliffe sent me this the other day, and I wanted to share it with you. He said, when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989 and the Soviet Union dismantled itself in 1991, freedom-loving people around the world rejoiced. A source of enslavement, godliness, and untold amounts of human misery was finally gone. While people in China and other communist authoritarian dictatorships continued to suffer and continue to do so now, the world seemed to be moving in the right direction. But now, barely 30 years later, advocates of Marxism have figured out how to make this failed ideology appealing to a new generation in the West. By promising safety from a virus, solutions to climate change, and a libertine society in which people are free to choose their own gender. Should we be surprised? No. Marxists have always dangled fictitious benefits in front of the faces of those they hope to win over, while in reality asserting that the authority of the state should also supersede the autonomy of the individual to live, work, and worship as he or she chooses. Even our First Amendment is not safe from attack, as purveyors of this Marxist ideology now seek to silence dissenters by shutting them off of school media or social media and canceling their careers. This is no surprise either, as suppression of open discussion and discourse has been a weapon in the Marxist toolbox since the beginnings. Christians have in some cases been told that the expression of traditional views on moral questions is no longer acceptable, and that they must now abandon biblical principles and accept the immorality of the times. But we can stop this by seeing it for what it is and refusing to surrender our beliefs. Nikita Khrushchev warned us in 1956 that his ideology would take America without a single shot being fired. He could still be right, but only if we let it happen by being complacent. When you think about the good word there by Ken Wycliffe, I think he's right on it. You know, when you follow the history of Lenin and Trotsky, and you follow the Russian movement from the 1918 Bolshevik period up to Joseph Stalin and the gulags, what we're talking about, friend, is control, government control of the economy, which in turn means government control of the political landscape. It means government control of the social, mandates upon mandates that dictate to you what you can and cannot do, whether it's your health or whether it's your own well-being or whether it's your own viewpoints of religion and social discourse. The government is the boss. The government is the authority, and you must bow to that authority. So say the advocates of this heinous and wicked ideology. And we'll be back in just a moment. And friends, we also have some products that you might be interested in that perhaps might help you. We have DVDs, we have a Faith, Family, and Freedom handbook. Be sure that you consider these. Perhaps your church might want some. We try to present our materials from a Christian perspective, a Christian worldview, and we're glad for that. Thank you for joining us today. Let me elaborate a little bit more on the subject at hand today, this what we call the counter-revolution that we see occurring. Who would have believed that just a few months ago that we would have seen such a diametric change in the social norms of our country? What we seem to be embracing today would be considered the abnormal. For example, we never, other than maybe it being discussed in school classes, maybe in your economics classes or whatever, no one ever thought seriously about socialism coming to America. We know that we're a mixed economy. We're not all private enterprise. We do have the post office. We do have government bureaucracies that supposedly help with different aspects of our life. But we have Social Security and other benefits from Medicare and all like that. So there is some mixture. Maybe some would advocate maybe too much government, but at least we never fully said that we were going to become a controlled economy, one in which the elites or the bureaucrats, perhaps in D.C. or somewhere, decide what shall be produced, how much shall be produced, and who will do the producing. Isn't it amazing, and I know this has nothing to do necessarily with this subject, but I think it goes along with the idea of control. Isn't it amazing that we've been requiring masks for everybody in most places, but it doesn't seem to apply to those on the southern border that are coming into places like McAllen, Texas. I've spoken down there in churches in that area, and I have friends down in that area. And it seems so sad to see what we're doing in our schools. And I know you and I, we all have our opinions, but isn't it amazing that we're continuing to ask little children to be masked? I don't know all the data. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a person that's knowledgeable in viruses and all like that. But I simply want to get to the point, and that is control. When the government can mandate that you have to do this, have to do that, but they can't require you to have an ID to vote. I mean, you got to have an ID for everything else to, get on a plane and for most transactions. But to require a person to fully prove that he's alive, that's not one of the requirements, evidently, for voting. And I think we're talking about government control. I believe it was President Ronald Reagan that said nothing is as permanent as a temporary government program. And I've often felt like that you could put the federal government in charge of the Sahara Desert, and within a matter of weeks, there'd be a shortage of sand. We've seen just recently another proposal for $3.5 trillion of spending. Who's going to bear the burden for this spending? Does it mean that our children and grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, are they going to have the benefits of liberty? Without liberty, who among us would even want to, to be alive? Or if we had to be placed in gulags or concentration camps. Notice what happened in Russia. Dissenters were dealt with at the point of death, and it's still that way in many of the communist countries like China. There is no dissent. There's very little religious freedom, maybe almost none. And people go to great lengths to bring in Bibles, and missionaries do that. Marx was an atheist. He said religion is the drug or the opiate of the people. When you're talking about control, you're talking about control of basically everything within that economy. Do we want to live in that kind of society where our every movement is regulated, that it's overseen, that it's scrutinized? And let's face it, with modern technology, and I'm not trying to play on paranoia, but I'm just simply saying, if they can know where you are, and they do about at any time, and especially with the new cell phones and the apps and all like that, it's quite scary, isn't it? And I'll be back in just a moment. And friends, again, I want to thank you for being with us today. If you would remind your church people, tell them about our programming, for that indeed we would be grateful. And if you and your church deem this kind of program to be important, if you think it's worth promoting and worth having, whatever you can do to help us to pay for broadcast time, production time, or whatever, would be greatly appreciated. And that's about as much as I need to say about that. Let me just continue in this dialogue section to say this. I think that it's the nature of people to aspire to freedom. We were born to be free. Christ makes us free in Him spiritually. But I think to be under despotism, or to be under authoritarian rule, or to be under a tyrant, or under those that can say if you live or die. I was thinking of a book that somebody had written, and in the book they were talking about during the World War II period, the concentration camps, when there would be those in the brown shirts or the Gestapo, and they would kill people. One lady wrote that she was not permitted to cry. A cry would signal that she was alive, and to do so would mean that her life would also be taken. Lying there knowing that maybe other family members, no doubt, were probably dead, yet somehow you had managed to live, but you couldn't cry because it would be your life as well. Too scared to cry. I'm afraid that unless we come to our senses in America, unless we become vigilant and we think about these things, I don't think any of us will be immune. I don't think we as individuals, our churches, our pastors, and especially those that want to promote critical race theory, that want to promote the superiority of any race above another race, I think we will face the dire consequences of that type of thinking. And unfortunately, there is a movement in our land to take away anything that has significance, that has anything relative to our past. None of us would endorse terrorist organizations from any group, white, black, but we are here to say that all men are created equal in the eyes of God. That includes all women. So said our founding fathers. We need to continuously to seek truth and to try to live in harmony with our fellow man. But we cannot do it if we promote the progressive agenda of those who come in the form of euphemisms and give it a glowing title, yet when the umbrella is taken away, we see clearly that the forces are sinister, that they are destroying the future for our little children. It's so sad to think about it. I hope that you and I, and especially men in the pulpit, will cry aloud and spare not, speak truth to evil, declare the full counsel of God, and tell people the truth at all costs. We're not in this thing just to have numbers. If it means standing alone, let's stand alone. The scriptures is what makes the church. The church is, the scriptures are not to conform to the church necessarily. The scriptures are not meant to go along with whatever the thinking of that present church might be. The church needs to make sure it's in line with the Scriptures. Doctrine is important. If the doctrine is not right, the details don't matter. So I hope that you will embrace truth, that you'll stand for it, that you'll get involved, that you'll attend meetings and keep up with your representatives, whether it's the local, state, or national level. Do all that we can to spare this country, and mainly let's pray and seek God's face. Ask Him to forgive us of our wicked ways and turn to Him while He may be found. I believe this may be the only solution that's available to us. And it's by only, I don't mean that it's down the line. It should be the first priority. We ought to turn to Him, and let's do it today. Let's not procrastinate. I want to thank you for taking your time. This is your friend, Andrew Phipps, saying, may God bless you and yours.
Phipps-Faith-Family-Freedom, presented by Clemens Home Solutions and Blue Gate Restaurant and Bakery, Heritage Funeral Care, Ashton Surveyors, Hillsdale Farm, Cardinal Exteriors Roofing Specialist, Dr. Jeff Hiltz, and Sam Pierce Chevrolet.